Have you ever had a neighbor who thinks they run your life? My name is Ryan Mitchell, a residential project engineer for over 10 years, and I thought I knew how to deal with rules. But when I moved into the Pinewood Grove subdivision, I met Deborah Hayes, the president of the HOA who turned my dream home into a nerve-wracking nightmare. It all started with a letter in my mailbox criticizing my yard for a lack of uniformity. I had barely hung the pictures in my living room. What followed was an epic battle involving a destroyed garden, absurd rules, and a concrete block wall that became a legend in the neighborhood. Want to know how I beat a suburban tyrant using her own rulebook against her? Stick with me because this story will make you laugh, feel outraged, and maybe even want to build your own wall. Pinewood Grove was marketed as paradise on earth, lawns so perfect they looked combed, kids riding. Tricycles in sync, and the smell of barbecue floating in the air every Sunday like it was law. When I moved in, boxes still stacked in the garage and full of naive optimism, I thought I had hit the jackpot. New house, new life, right? Wrong. On day 5, the blue skies of Pinewood Grove were overshadowed by someone named Deborah. She knocked on my door with all the grace of a court officer. Her gold-rimmed glasses sparkled in the sun, and her smile, the kind that makes you double-check if your shirt is buttoned wrong. Ryan, pleasure to meet you. I'm Deborah, the president of the Homeowners Association, she said, as if the title came with a crown. Before I could offer her coffee, she extended her arm and handed me a brick disguised as a book. The Pinewood Grove Harmony Guide, 85 pages of fine print and promises of order. Your yard needs some adjustments, she added, in a tone that mixed pity with authority. Study the guide, it'll help. I thanked her, slightly stunned, and shut the door thinking it was just more fancy neighborhood bureaucracy. I mean, how bad could a landscaping manual be? Spoiler, very bad. That night, with a warm beer in hand and moving boxes staring at me, I opened the guide. It wasn't a book, it was a manifesto of control. Lawns had to be exactly 3.5 inches. Not more, not less, and with fines for violators. Mailboxes? Only in moonlight grey, which honestly looked like regular grey with a fancy name. Flower pots? Forbidden unless in the approved colour palette. Beige, pale blue, or soft vermilion. What the heck is soft vermilion? Even window curtains had to harmonise with the collective aesthetic. I closed the book with a mix of laughter and dread. Who writes this stuff? Worse, who actually follows it? I decided to play their game, at least for now. Next day I went on a mission to turn my house into a monument of conformity. I bought a can of serene beige paint for the front door, more expensive than my birthday dinner. I lined up the trash cans like soldiers on parade, exactly 30 centimeters apart. Yes, I measured. And the lawn? I spent hours trimming it with a ruler in hand, sweating under the sun while neighbors waved as if applauding my Pinewood Grove initiation. When I finished, my yard looked like a magazine photo, and I was the king of compliance, or so I thought. For nearly a year, I was Pinewood Grove's star pupil. My house was so ridiculously standard, it looked like a real estate catalogue. Photo, the kind that promises happiness in bold letters. Door in the exact shade of serene beige? Check. Trash bins lined up like they were ready for battle? Check. Lawn cut with surgical precision? Check. Check, check. I was a robot programmed by the Harmony Guide, and still Deborah was never satisfied. It was like she had a radar for invisible imperfections. First came the note about the wreath on my door. Too festive for March, she said, as if Christmas. Stars were a crime against humanity. Then came the solar light in my yard. Inappropriate lighting for the collective aesthetic, according to the warning, folded neatly and stamped with that smug pine tree logo. Every complaint was a punch to the gut, but I swallowed my pride, painted, adjusted, obeyed. I just wanted peace. Or so I told myself while drowning my frustration in cold coffee. But even the most patient saint has a breaking point. I decided my side yard, that forgotten strip of land facing a street where car horns blared like a sport, deserved a personal touch. Just a small one, nothing revolutionary. I wanted privacy, a spot to sip coffee without feeling like I was in a neighborhood reality show. So I became a detective in my own yard. I read every word on page 38, paragraph 6, listing approved plants. I chose jasmine bushes, aromatic, elegant, and most importantly, HOA approved. Height, 2.5 feet, well below the 4-foot limit. I hired a landscaper from the HOA's official list, a guy named Greg, who looked more bored by the rules than I was. I measured every inch with a tape, took before and after photos, and mentally assembled a dossier in case anyone dared question me. When I finished, the yard was a dream. The jasmines formed a living fence that muffled engine noise and spread a perfume that, for 3 whole weeks, made me believe I had beaten the system. Then came Thursday. I came home from work with the sun setting, dreaming of a cold beer and a chance to sit in my yard undisturbed. But before I could even take off my shoes, I saw it through the window. My bushes, my beautiful jasmines, reduced to mutilated stumps. It was like a hedge-trimming tornado had swept through. And there, in the middle of the botanical massacre, stood Deborah, like a victorious general. Her gold-rimmed glasses reflected the last rays of sunlight, and 2 men beside her held clippers like they were execution tools. One of them, wearing a trucker cap, looked a bit ashamed. The other, a skinny guy with a blank face, wiped the blades clean with a cloth. Deborah looked at me, and I swear her smile said, "You really thought you could challenge me?" "Deborah, what is this?" I asked, pointing at the stumps, like they were evidence of a crime. My voice trembled. From rage or shock, I couldn't tell. My heart pounded in my throat and blood rushed to my face as I tried not to explode. She adjusted her glasses with the calm of someone ordering a latte, not someone who'd just ordered the execution of a garden. "Russian, your bushes violated Code 5.1D of the Harmony Guide," she said, in that tone used to explain the obvious to a child. "They disrupted the street's visual harmony. As HOA president, I acted to protect the community." Every word. I was rehearsed like she had a speech ready for any uprising. Visual harmony, what code? I shot back, nearly tripping over my words. I followed everything. Page 38, paragraph 6, 2.5 feet high, jasmine approved by your sacred list. Deborah sighed, as if my outrage were merely an inconvenience. "A general email was sent last quarter, Ryan. We specified that shrubs can't obstruct the street's line of sight. You should have checked." "Email? What email?" I checked my inbox religiously, even the spam folder, and never saw anything beyond grill ads and notices about recyclable bin etiquette. I looked at what was left of my shrubs, were $200 in seedlings, labor, and dreams of privacy, now reduced to a sad pile of sticks. It was like my yard had been vandalized, only with official permission and the pompous pine tree seal of the association. I wanted to scream, throw the manual in her face, or at least ask if visual harmony included the right to feel at home. But standing there, under Deborah's watchful eye and those 2 landscapers, now sweeping up the wreckage with the energy of men who wished they were anywhere else, I knew exploding wouldn't help. I swallowed my rage, forced out a tight-lipped understood, and headed back inside. The door slammed behind me harder than I meant it to. That night, while the neighborhood slept under its perfectly trimmed lawns, I declared war. Not a loud war. No protest signs or screaming in the street. That's what Deborah expected, an excuse to fine me for disharmonious behavior. No, my war would be silent, surgical, and most importantly, by the book. I cracked open a beer, warmer than I'd like, and threw myself on the couch, HOA Harmony Guide in hand. If Pinewood Grove wanted to play bureaucracy, I was going to play like a pro. I flipped through the manual with the determination of a lawyer in a life-or-death case. Each page was a maze of jargon and rules so specific they could have been written by a dictator with OCD. Restrictions on water features, fountain spouts, must not exceed 2 gallons per minute. Laundry lines must be invisible from the street or subject to written warning, even an entire section on blackout curtain angles. I laughed to myself, picturing Deborah sneaking around at night with a ruler, measuring clotheslines in the dark. But then, on page 72, section 9.3, I struck gold. While shrubs had ridiculous height limits and visual impact clauses, concrete Block walls could go up to a glorious 6 feet high, 6 feet. That was practically a fortress. The catch? The project needed approval from the HOA's architectural committee and had to meet county building codes. I felt a chill of victory. This was the perfect loophole, a crack in Deborah's empire I could exploit. I closed the manual with a smile that, for the first time in months, wasn't forced. I grabbed my laptop and dove into everything about concrete blocks, durability, finishes, even the top-rated suppliers in the county. If Deborah wanted harmony, I'd build a wall so harmonious she couldn't complain. And maybe, just maybe, it'd block the street view and her gold-rimmed glasses. The next morning I woke up on a mission, turned my rage into concrete. As an engineer, I knew a good project was half technique, half art. So I locked myself in my makeshift office, a folding table between unopened moving boxes, and started designing. The wall of my dreams, 6 feet tall, concrete blocks as solid as my resolve, finished in Mojave hue, a sandy beige the Harmony Guide listed as aesthetically acceptable on page 81, section 12. I didn't stop at the basics. I made detailed blueprints with exact measurements, a technical report on drainage and stability, even a 3D sketch done on a free software that nearly fried my laptop. In the drawing, the wall was an elegant fortress, blocking street noise and securing privacy without looking like a prison. I even included a note explaining how it would enhance community harmony, words I shamelessly stole from the manual just to seal the deal. It was Deborah-proof. Or nearly. I emailed the full package to the HOA Architectural Committee, with a printed copy delivered to their office, a sad little room that smelled of stale paper and burnt coffee, where a bored receptionist barely looked at me. The rules were clear, no response within 12 business days, and the project is automatically approved. 12 days. I could wait. In the meantime, I cleared the space where my jasmines had been butchered, yanking out the stumps with a shovel and a healthy dose of therapeutic rage. I marked the foundation with stakes and string, each straight line a reminder that I was taking control. Neighbors passed by. Some waved out of curiosity. Others averted their eyes like I was some kind of heretic. One guy in a cap who always walked a Labrador even stopped and said good luck with her. I didn't need to ask who her was. The days dragged on. On the 7th, I checked my inbox, nothing. On the 9th, I called the HOA office, only to hear a robotic voice. Your request is under review. Please wait. On the 12th day, the silence was deafening. I double-checked the calendar, confirmed the deadline in the manual, page 17, paragraph 8, highlighted in yellow like a trophy, and felt a chill. No response. The wall was mine. On the 13th day, I rented a cement mixer that looked like it had escaped a construction site in the 80s, more rust than machine. I stacked concrete blocks, bags of cement, and set a classic rock playlist to stay in the zone. I started digging the foundation under the blazing sun, dirt flying, as I pictured the wall rising foot by foot. I was mixing the cement with a shovel, the mixer drowning out the world when I heard screeching tires. A black SUV pulled up. Out stepped Deborah, a hurricane of golden glasses and outrage. "Ryan!" she barked, heels clicking on the asphalt, like gunshots. "This is illegal. Stop now or I'll call the authorities." I shut off the mixer, wiped the sweat from my brow and faced her, feeling a nearly childish glee at how disheveled she looked. "Illegal?" I asked, calm as could be, holding the ace up my sleeve. I pulled out my phone, opened the email with the submission receipt, date, time, reference number, and held it up like it was holy scripture. I submitted the project 13 days ago, Deborah. Page 17, paragraph 8 of your own manual. No response within 12 business days. It's automatically approved. I made sure to quote the regulation with the poise of a courtroom attorney. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Her glasses slid down her nose a fraction of an inch, and for one glorious second, Deborah, queen of harmony, tyrant of the pine tree, was speechless. It was a miracle. This can't be right," she stammered, clutching her phone like it might summon a new rule from thin air. "I'll consult the committee." I shrugged, grabbed the shovel, and returned to the cement. "Consult all you want. The wall goes up tomorrow." While she marched back to her car, muttering to herself with a mix of fury and despair, I felt something I hadn't felt since moving to Pinewood Grove: control. But deep down, I knew Deborah wouldn't let this slide. She was like a bloodhound, sniffing out infractions, and I had just waved a bone in front of her. The wall would go up, yes, but the war was just beginning. Building the wall became more than a task. It was my manifesto, my cry for freedom in the form of cement and sweat. Every day after clocking out from work, I swapped my engineer's shirt for a worn-out tank top and turned mason. I stacked concrete blocks with the precision of someone who's measured bridges, each joint aligned as if my life depended on it. The mixer roared like a loyal partner, and the sun beat down hard, but I didn't stop. It was me against the harmony. Guide, and for the first time in Pinewood Grove, I was winning. The neighborhood started to notice. At first it was just a curious onlooker here and there, peeking from behind cloud cream-approved curtains. But soon the neighbors showed. Up for real. The guy with the Labrador, who I now knew was named Mike, brought a cold beer on a hot night and shared how Deborah fined him for leaving his son's bike in the driveway. "Too visible," she said. An elderly woman with white hair, Mrs. Clara, stopped by with her gardening cart and confessed she'd gotten a warning for curtains deemed excessively turquoise. "Turquoise," she repeated, laughing and shaking her head. Even the skater kid from the corner, who never talked to anyone, gave a shy thumbs up as he passed. Slowly, I realized the obvious. Deborah wasn't just my nightmare. She was everyone's lawn vigilante, a gold-rimmed dictator ruling with fines and venomous notes. When the wall hit 4 feet, tall enough to block the street but still short of my dreamed-of 6, Deborah tried another move. I got home one muggy afternoon to find a notice pinned to my mailbox, embossed with the association's ridiculous pine tree logo. "Your construction materials are obstructing public pathways, violating Code 7.2b, it read, in letters that seemed to shout. Obstructing? My blocks were stacked on my property, 1/2 a meter from the sidewalk, so neat they could have been an art exhibit. I ran to the manual, my fingers already calloused from flipping through it. Page 44, Section 7. Construction materials may be temporarily stored on the owner's property during approved works, provided they do not encroach on public pathways. I grinned like I'd found a winning lottery ticket. Deborah's notice wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. I crumpled it and tossed it in the trash, the sound of the paper crushing more satisfying than any symphony. I went back to work with more fire. I mixed cement, laid blocks, measured with a tape to ensure every centimeter was perfect. The neighbors now formed an informal audience. Mike brought beer, Mrs. Clara offered lemonade, and even the skater kid stopped to watch, as if the wall were a fireworks show. "Slap her in the face with that concrete, man," Mike said once, raising his beer can. I laughed, but deep down I knew the slap hadn't landed yet. Not fully. On the 18th day, the wall was done. 6 feet tall, an imposing Mojave tone fortress that reflected the sun like it had been hand-polished. It wasn't just concrete. It was my answer to Deborah's tyranny, a monument to the idea that I could live in my house my way. I ran. My hand over the smooth surface, feeling the cool texture under my fingers. And for the first time in months, I breathed easy. Deborah wasn't the type to accept defeat, not with those gold-rimmed glasses gleaming like a beacon of authority. I knew the wall my Mojave tone castle had hit her pride square on, and she wouldn't let it go cheaply. Less than a week after my monument to freedom was finished, the counterattack came. An email from the county arrived, cold and official, stating that my wall was under investigation for lack of a construction permit. The signature, forwarded by Deborah H., president of the Pinewood Grove Homeowners Association. Of course, she'd gone to the county, probably thinking I was just an amateur engineer who forgot the paperwork. Little did she know I play chess with bureaucracy. Before laying the first block, I'd already chased down every stamp, every form, every signature the county required. My document folder was a masterpiece. Permits, approved plans, even an environmental impact report I did just to be safe. When the county inspector, a guy named Tom with a clipboard that looked older than he was, knocked on my door, I greeted him with coffee and a smile. He measured the wall, checked the foundations, flipped through my permits with a grunt of approval. "First-class work, Ryan," he said, scratching his grey beard. "Looks like it came out of an architecture catalogue. Everything's in order." I let out an internal sigh of relief, but couldn't resist prodding. As we walked through the yard, I pointed to the stumps of my jasmines, still scattered like scars. "Know who ordered those cut down?" "The association. Said they were against visual harmony." Tom frowned, shifting his clipboard to the other arm. "Pinewood Grove, huh? Always something with this neighborhood." He lowered his voice, as if the association's pine tree could be listening. "Did you know their new entrance sign, that shiny thing, doesn't have county approval?" My eyes must have lit up because he laughed. "Yeah, that's right. Someone should look into that." Someone. Like me. That night I swapped beer for a mug of strong coffee and dove into the county's public records like an obsessed detective. The website was a maze of broken links and poorly scanned PDFs, but after hours of clicking and cursing the slow connection, I hit the jackpot. The Pinewood Grove sign, a steel and acrylic monstrosity lit up with "Welcome to Paradise," etched in pretentious cursive, was a $20,000 project paid for with association funds. One problem: no one ever applied for a county permit. No forms, no approvals, nothing but a vague email from the association promising to regularize soon. It was illegal down to the last screw. I could have let it go, saved the info for a barbecue chat with Mike. But the thought of Deborah destroying my shrubs, fining bikes and curtains, and now trying to tear down my wall with bogus complaints. No. She wanted rules. I'd give her rules. I drafted a formal complaint to the county, attaching screenshots of the records, photos of the sign, and even a quick calculation showing it exceeded the height limit by 30 centimeters. I hit send with the same thrill as scoring a goal in overtime. Days later, the payback arrived. An official county notice reached the association, carbon copy to my email, thanks to my complaint. The sign was fined $3,500, and the project, still in the installation phase, was halted until full regularization. Translation: Deborah would have to swallow months of meetings, paperwork, and, with luck, a budget hole she loved to control. Fine sign was just the appetizer. Knocking Deborah's pride with a county complaint gave me a taste of victory, but it also lit a fire. If she played dirty, I could play smarter. My wall stood tall, solid as a fortress, but I wanted more. I wanted to know how far her reign went. So I started digging, not with a shovel, but with conversations. I went door to door offering coffee, listening to stories, piecing together what Pinewood Grove really was beneath the veneer of perfect lawns. Mrs. Clara, a 70-year-old widow with kind eyes and a heavy southern drawl, welcomed me with homemade cookies and an old grudge. She showed me a welcome mat stored in the closet, blue with yellow flowers, too flashy, according to Deborah's note that came with a $50 fine. "I just wanted to brighten up the porch, Ryan," she said, folding the mat like it was a forbidden relic. Across the street, Mr. Nguyen, a biology teacher who seemed calmer than a monk, told me how he had to rip out a rosebush from his yard because it wasn't native enough per the manual. He even tried arguing that the plant attracted bees, but Deborah responded with a warning about disrespecting ecological harmony. The more I listened, the clearer it became. Deborah didn't lead the association. She wielded it like a whip, brandishing the Harmony Guide to intimidate anyone who dared show personality. Each story was a puzzle piece, but I needed something bigger, something to make her house of cards collapse. I grabbed the association's meeting minutes available in a dusty archive on their website and started reading. It was like cracking a code, paragraphs full of jargon, vague decisions, and hasty signatures. Then I spotted a pattern in the numbers. Amid fines for mats and rose bushes, the association was spending buckets of money on odd things. $10,000 for a landscaping consultancy I'd never seen in the neighborhood, $5,000 for community image maintenance with no details, and even $2,000 for integration events no one recalled happening. The juiciest bit? The landscaping consultancy went straight to a company called Green Vista Solutions, and a quick Google search revealed the owner was... Surprise! Deborah's husband, a guy named Richard with a website so generic it looked like it was made in Word. I dug deeper. The financial reports were a mess. Missing pages, absent receipts, and a reserve balance that shifted like magic. I grabbed my laptop, a mug of cold coffee, and started building what I called the Deborah dossier. 10 pages of pure dynamite, screenshots of the minutes, association emails promising transparency and delivering smoke, Green Vista records with her husband's name, and even quotes from the manual itself, page 94, section 3, demanding full. Clarity in community expenditures. Every line was an arrow aimed at the heart of her empire. I wasn't just the wall guy anymore. I was the guy with a match, staring at a pile of kindling. The annual association meeting was the perfect stage. For weeks, my dossier, 10 pages of inconvenient truths about Deborah and her gold-rimmed reign, had been my secret, but now it was time to unleash it on the world. I woke up with my stomach churning, half from nerves, half from adrenaline. I printed 100 copies of the report, each with a title in stark black letters, Pinewood Grove deserves justice. It wasn't exaggeration, it was fact. As I folded the pages, I pictured Deborah's face as her empire of rules crumbled. My wall was already a punch. This would be the knockout. I arrived early at the community hall, a beige building smelling of disinfectant with folding chairs that creaked, as if complaining about the weight of bureaucracy. I spread the dossiers on the tables, one for each homeowner, like an invitation to revolution. Slowly, the neighbors trickled in. First, Mrs. Clara, her gardening cart parked outside, and a glint of vengeance in her eyes. Then Mr. Nguyen, clutching, a coffee cup and a notebook full of scribbles. Mike, the Labrador guy, brought 3 other guys from his street, all with stories of fines for things as dumb as misaligned trash cans. Even the skater kid from the corner showed up, cap backward, looking more curious than committed. When I counted 90 people, against the usual 10 or 12 who showed up to rubber-stamp sleepy budgets, I knew the game had changed. Deborah walked in at 7 p.m. sharp, her heels echoing on the linoleum like a war drum. She wore a flawless navy blazer, but when she saw the crowd, something shifted. She swallowed hard. A quick motion that almost went unnoticed, but I saw it. It was the first sign that the Pine Tree Queen felt her throne wobble. "Good evening, homeowners," she began with that rehearsed tone of someone who thinks they're still in charge. "Let's get to the agenda, lawn maintenance and the new cleaning schedule." Her voice was steady, but her gold-rimmed glasses slipped half a centimeter down her nose, and she adjusted them with a subtle tremor. Before she could open her PowerPoint, probably packed with charts about visual harmony, Mr. Nguyen raised his hand. He was calm, but that night there was fire in his eyes. "Excuse me, Deborah," he said, holding a copy of the dossier like it was a grenade. "I propose an emergency motion, the removal of the president for abuse of authority, as documented in this report." The room erupted. It wasn't just applause, it was a roar of support, chairs creaking, voices overlapping. Mrs. Clara shouted, "About time!" and Mike slammed the table, laughing like he'd won the lottery. Even the skater kid let out a hell yeah that echoed from the back. Deborah went pale, the kind of pale that printer paper envies. "This is outrageous," she snapped, her voice jumping an octave. This dossier is a pack of lies, a smear campaign." She pointed at Mr. Nguyen, then at me, as if she could incinerate us with her glare. But the crowd wasn't buying it. Someone shouted, "What about Clara's Matt?" And another, "My rosebush, huh?" The hall turned into an impromptu courtroom, and Deborah was the defendant. The vote's result hit like a bomb. 87 in favor of Deborah's removal, 3 against her and 2 sour-faced allies, a couple who always showed up to meetings with matching pens. When Mr. Nguyen announced the numbers, the community hall shook. Applause, shouts, even a good riddance that, I swear, came from Mrs. Clara, her gardening cart parked by the door. Deborah stood frozen at the podium, her hands gripping the wood as if she could anchor herself against the tide. Her gold-rimmed glasses reflected the fluorescent lights, but her shine, gone. For the first time, the Pine Tree Queen looked small, a navy blazer figure sinking under the weight of 87 raised hands. She tried to speak, stammering something about legal action and disrespect for order, but no one listened. The vice president, Tom, a laid-back guy who seemed more at ease fixing grills than running meetings, stepped forward with a throat clearing. "As interim president," he said, flipping through the dossier that everyone now held like a Bible, "I'll audit all the association's finances, and effective immediately, fines are suspended until further notice." The crowd roared again. Mike, the Labrador guy, slapped my shoulder so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Mrs. Clara winked at me, as if to say, "Nice work, kid." Even the skater kid chewing gum in the corner raised his thumb, a gesture that, coming from him, was pure gold. I left the hall with a light chest, the cool night air hitting my face. I stopped at the corner and looked at my wall in the distance, its 6 feet of Mojave tone gleaming under the street's yellowish lights. It wasn't just concrete. It was freedom, not just mine, but for everyone who'd ever opened their mailbox to find a venomous note stamped with the pine tree logo. As I walked home, catching the scent of jasmine still lingering in my yard, or maybe it was just my imagination, I thought, Pinewood Grove finally felt like home. But Deborah wasn't. Going to exit the stage without one last performance. 2 days later, at the end of a muggy afternoon, I heard tires screeching on my street. There she came, storming out of her black SUV like a hurricane in heels. "Ryan!" she shouted, marching up to my porch with her finger pointed like a weapon. "You manipulated everyone with that filthy dossier. Thought you could ruin my reputation like that. You won't get away with this." Her face was red, her glasses crooked, and for the first time, I saw cracks in that queenly facade. I smiled, not out of arrogance, but calm. "Deborah," I said, crossing my arms, "I just used your rules. Every page, every paragraph, maybe you should read the manual sometime." She opened her mouth to retort, probably with more threats of authorities or violated harmony, but stopped when a voice cut through the air. "Deborah, a moment." It was Mrs. Clara walking with a determination that made her gardening cart rattle. Beside her, Tom, holding a folder full of papers and an expression that promised nothing good. "We just reviewed the finances," he said, with the calm of someone who knows they're holding an ace. "We found $12,000 transferred to an account. In your name, no justification. Care to explain?" Mrs. Clara crossed her arms, her eyes sparking as if she were ready to fine Deborah for excessive nerve. Deborah stammered, the red in her face turning ghostly white. That's a mistake, a misunderstanding." But her words came out jumbled, and no one on the street, because yes, neighbors were already peeking through windows, was buying it. She looked around, saw the curtains twitching, the skater kid on the corner recording everything with his phone, and something broke. Without another word, she spun on her heels, tripped on the curb, and bolted to her SUV. The engine roared and she vanished around the corner, leaving only the echo of tires and a satisfied silence. A week later, as I sipped coffee on my porch, I saw a realtor's truck stop at her house. A for sale sign was staked in her lawn, a lawn, by the way, that was a bit too overgrown for her standards. Mike passed by with his Labrador and laughed. "The Queen's fled, huh?" I shook my head, looking at my wall. Deborah might be leaving, but Pinewood Grove was still a chessboard, and I'd learned how to play. Today, my wall isn't just a stack of blocks, it's Pinewood Grove's pride. In the morning sun, the Mojave tone shines like it was carved for a museum, and the neighbors can't stop admiring it. Mike stops by with his Labrador almost every day, snapping Instagram photos with captions like "Concrete Master." Mrs. Clara, now sporting a welcome mat so flowery it seems to defy the manual itself, asked for tips on building a hedge, but without following anyone's rules, got it, Ryan. Even the skater kid, who now calls me Wall Guy, showed up with a new board, saying its design was kinda inspired by the smooth texture of my 6-foot glory. The new association board, led by Tom, even sent an email praising the wall's aesthetic contribution. I laughed out loud. Who'd have thought my symbol of rebellion would become the neighborhood star? Every time I see my wall, I feel like I won. If you could build something epic in your yard, what would it be? Share in the comments. Let's dream together. Pinewood Grove has changed, and it wasn't just because of my dossier or Deborah's escape. With Tom in charge, the neighborhood seems to have exhaled in relief. The petty fines are gone. No more notes for turquoise curtains or bikes in the driveway. The board now hosts real barbecues, not those integration events that only existed in her reports. At the last meeting, we decided to paint the community hall a soft yellow, a color the old manual would have called disharmonious. Mrs. Clara suggested hanging string lights at the neighborhood entrance, and Mr. Nguyen is planning a community garden with, get this, non-native rose bushes. It's as if the association's pompous pine tree was pruned, and something more human, more us, grew in its place. My war with Deborah taught me one thing. Sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting or breaking the rules, it's playing the game better than your opponent. I read her manual, used its loopholes, rallied the neighbors, and built something she never could, a neighborhood that feels like home. Every time I look at my wall, with its neat cacti and the sun hitting its smooth surface, I feel like I won. Not just against her, but against any idea that you have to bow your head to live in peace.